Well, there's not much use for braggarts or big-headed people on Jesus' team, eh? He keeps everybody humble, and rightfully so, because he himself is so humble. This gospel account starts out with him telling them what was going to happen to him. But first, he wanted to get them away. As they were traveling through Galilee, he didn't want anybody to know about it. And for so many reasons, I think we understand Jesus's unwillingness to be with large crowds at the wrong time. We know, for instance, that he was only moved with pity, and that was the only reason he would perform miracles of healing, was because he was moved with pity, because he didn't want to draw the attention of the Roman authorities or the Jewish authorities. Certainly, when he calmed the storm, when he walked on water, when he fed the 5,000, these were spectacular miracles. But this was the point that the apostles needed to hear what his real purpose was, and interestingly enough, what their likely purpose was. And so he says, the Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise. That had to be hard for the apostles to hear, because life had been good to them. They were on the inner circle of the miracle worker, the most famous person in that area. And of course, they were looked up upon, looked up in terms of the status with people, the fact that they had access to him. But Jesus knew that this was not going to be an easy road for him, and it certainly wasn't going to be for them either. And that's why, as he gets them aside, he tells them that he will be killed, and after 3 days will rise. And it says the apostles didn't understand, and they were afraid to question him. This wasn't part of their mindset. This wasn't what they were anticipating. They were with the miracle worker. I mean, the one who would call down armies of angels from heaven to help them in their task. And then it moves along in the gospel. They've come to Capernaum, which of course is their base. And inside the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the way? And isn't it interesting, when they should have been, and probably were, somewhat staggered by the news that he shares, they're still caught up with what their position is among the group. I mean, who's the second or third in command? Who's on his right hand? Who's on his left hand? And Jesus, frustrated, I'm sure, that it's not getting through to them what this is really all about, although we know it will. We know that they will be baptized in the same fire that Jesus is. But it's important at this particular point to make sure that there's humility among the group, and there's a recognition that if they're going to follow him, then they have to live like him. They have to interact with people like he does. And he says, if anyone wishes to be first, and apparently many, if not all of the apostles did, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all. When the Pope, and this has been going on for centuries, would sign his letters, he would write Servus Servorum, servant of the servants. And it was certainly to lay claim to what Jesus wanted of his followers, to dismiss their importance and find the importance in others, to find any way that they could serve the needs of others. And then to put an exclamation point on it, he takes a child, places it in their midst. Now, of course, a child is always the lowest status in society, has the least influence. But at least today, we have child protective services and such as that. A child is relatively protected. But back then, they were the property of their parents, nothing more. And they had no right to any kind of justice. But here's Jesus. He puts his arm around him. And he equates this child with him. He says, whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives not me, but the one who sent me. You can't get a much more humble example for the people of what he desires for them than this particular case. Pointing out to the apostles who aspire to greatness, here's greatness, this little child. And of course, Jesus himself, finding a greatness in not being called upon for people to serve him, but that he might serve. That he might help others with their disabilities and their illnesses, that he might give them that good news that we so desperately need to hear. I want to make just a quick point on that also with our second letter, our letter of St. James. I've had this whole month to preach to the Kansans on St. James, and I really think that we're so blessed in September to have the letter of St. James. And by the way, people who wonder, was this James the Greater or James the Less of the two apostles, the son of Zebedee or the son of Alphaeus? Likely neither. He's the Jesus that's mentioned, James is mentioned as the first bishop of Jerusalem. But he, if you were listening closely, and I know you were in the last few weeks, he drives home the unvarnished truth. He won't let people get by on pomp and circumstance. He began by urging people not to be hearers only, but doers of the word. He wanted them to be sure not to differentiate between somebody who was dressed in fine clothing and somebody who's dressed in ragged clothing. He wanted people to understand that the particular passage, that the labor that he seeks from us is that we need to go on and choose correctly between the life with Christ and a longer life here on earth. If we lose our life, we save it. If we save our life, we lose it. And then here's James emphasizing that same sense of humility and forcing people to be conscious of where they are. It says, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every foul practice. Because those who are jealous and selfish are not ones who are going to be the servant of the servants. But the wisdom from above, right, says James, is first of all pure, then peaceable, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without inconsistency or insincerity. And of course, James stressed for us last week the importance of our fruits of doing for others, and recognizing, of course, that, you know, if we are looking at the society around us, where do the wars and where do the conflicts among you come from? Is it not from your passions? You covet but do not possess. You kill and envy, but you cannot obtain. You do not possess because you do not ask. You ask but do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. I think we've all found in our lives that the prayers that we dedicate to others who are in need are much more likely to be answered than prayers for ourselves. And that's certainly a point that James is making here. And it's certainly true that as we consider in our lives the importance of not only being a servant, but also humbly accepting whatever the servant's assignment might be, and to leave it to others to claim to be